In the heart of a worn-down city, where dreams often fade into the gray mist of forgotten streets, lived a young boy named Noah. His life had been a string of hardships, each one heavier than the last, until the day the world seemed to take away the last piece of love he had left. His little sister, Amelia, was only a baby, but she was his everything. She was the heartbeat that kept him going, the light in the darkest corners of his world. The two of them, bound by blood, had nothing but each other after a tragic loss had torn their family apart. Their home was a place of silence, shattered by the noise of things they could never return to. When tragedy struck, Noah found himself in a battle he wasn't prepared for. With no one left to turn to, and no adult who could understand the depth of his love and responsibility, he became Amelia's protector. His small hands held her close, his arms the only shelter she had. She, an innocent soul, didn't yet understand the harshness of the world around her, but Noah knew that every breath she took, every fragile moment she existed, depended on him. His promises to her echoed in his heart, binding him to her like a lifeline. But the system, indifferent and rigid, soon came knocking. Social workers, officers, and the world of foster care stood between them, each one unable to see the raw, unyielding love Noah had for his sister. And yet, against all odds, Noah's determination shone through like a beacon. He wasn't just a child, he was a guardian, a protector, someone who would not allow the world to take his sister from him, no matter the cost. Now, as he clung to the only family he had left, Noah stood at the crossroads of a broken system and the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to keep them together, to keep her safe. But as the walls closed in around them, every step forward was fraught with uncertainty. Would the system bend to their love, or would they be torn apart forever? This is their story, a tale of love, sacrifice, and a young boy's fight to keep his sister close in a world that didn't seem to care. Noah had always believed that the weight of the world could be carried by his shoulders alone, until that day. He was barely a child himself, but the moment he laid eyes on his baby sister, Amelia, he knew that his life had to be about more than just survival. Their bond was more than a simple connection of blood. It was a lifeline, a promise, forged through the fires of loss and uncertainty. The day came when the harsh reality of their situation could no longer be ignored. The Child Protective Services had arrived, their purpose cold and impersonal. They spoke in detached voices, asking questions that Noah could barely understand. Amelia, innocent and unaware, had been placed in his arms, and he swore to her, in that moment, that he would never let anyone take her away. Noah's promise was more than just words. It was a vow, one that would test the very core of his strength. As he held Amelia close, feeling her tiny body against his, he didn't just see the baby in his arms. He saw his future, and it was one where he would protect her at all costs, even if it meant facing a world that didn't understand their love. The social worker, Ms. Bennett, had watched the boy carefully. She knew the statistics. The likelihood of children like Noah and Amelia staying together was slim. Foster care had a way of separating families, even when the bond between them was as strong as Noah's. But as she looked at the determination in his eyes, something shifted within her. She had seen children fight for survival, but never one so young who carried the weight of such a heavy responsibility with such fierce devotion. Noah, trembling slightly with the burden of his promise, felt the warmth of Amelia's tiny form in his arms. He spoke softly to her, though she couldn't understand the words, his voice carrying a message of love, reassurance, and an unspoken vow. "I'll never let you go, I'll keep you safe." It was a promise he had made to himself long before this moment, but now, it was a sacred vow, one that he would do everything in his power to honor. As Miss Bennett guided them to the car, Noah couldn't help but feel a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he believed, even if only for a fleeting moment, that things might somehow get better. The car ride felt like an eternity to Noah. As they drove through the city, the hum of the engine was the only sound that filled the silence. Amelia had fallen asleep in his arms, her tiny breaths steady and peaceful, unaware of the storm that had just passed through their lives. Noah, on the other hand, was wide awake, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 worries. The world around him seemed like a blur, but one thing was crystal clear: his responsibility had just grown tenfold. He was no longer just a child. He was her protector, her anchor in a world that seemed intent on pulling them apart. Miss Bennett, who had been sitting quietly beside him, glanced over at Noah every so often. There was something extraordinary about him, something that set him apart from other children. Most kids his age were focused on their own small worlds, their struggles limited to playground arguments and schoolwork. But Noah, his life had already been shaped by forces far beyond his control. He had already known loss, already known hardship. And yet, there was no bitterness in his eyes, no resignation. There was only determination. He hadn't spoken much during the ride, but Miss Bennet knew that his silence wasn't one of sorrow, it was one of resolve. She could see the way his hands held Amelia just a little tighter whenever the car hit a bump, the way his gaze never left her face, always checking to make sure she was all right. His devotion was undeniable. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to think about what she had seen. She had worked with many families, some full of love, others broken beyond repair. But Noah's commitment to Amelia was something different, something rare. She knew that he was a child who had already learned the hard lessons of life, and yet, in his eyes, there was no room for self-pity. There was only love. Soon, the car pulled up to a modest group home, and Miss Bennet gently woke Amelia, her small eyes fluttering open. Noah looked out the window, feeling a mix of dread and hope. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that, for today, he had kept his promise. He had kept Amelia safe. And as they stepped out of the car and into the warm glow of the group home's lights, he allowed himself a brief moment to believe that perhaps this was the start of something better, something that could, for once, be theirs. The following days unfolded like a wave of compassion sweeping over them. Noah and Amelia's story, once a quiet and isolated struggle, quickly became the heart of a growing movement within the community. The local organizations, the staff at the group home, and even families who had never been touched by such hardship, all found themselves drawn to their story. People were moved, not just by the hardship Noah had endured, but by the strength and love that had kept him going. He had taken on the role of guardian at an age when most children were focused on schoolyard games and simple joys, yet he had faced unimaginable challenges with a maturity that defied his years. It wasn't long before offers of help began pouring in. Families who once felt detached from the struggles of others suddenly found themselves compelled to reach out. Some offered their time, some their resources, and others simply shared kind words. But it was the collective spirit of generosity that began to take shape, the undeniable sense of unity that moved everyone involved. It was as though the community had found a way to rally around Noah and Amelia, creating a safety net where none had existed before. The efforts to find a stable home for them were underway almost immediately. The goal was clear: to find a place where Noah's unyielding sense of responsibility could be respected, where his role as a protector could continue without the weight of constant fear. The people who stepped forward to help weren't just interested in offering temporary assistance. They wanted to build a future for Noah and Amelia, one where they could thrive together, where they could have the stability they had been denied for so long. And as each new offer came through, each act of kindness felt like a small victory for Noah. It was as if the world was slowly shifting, offering him the opportunity to finally dream of a life where he wouldn't have to carry such an immense burden alone. A life where, for the first time, he could consider the possibility of happiness. A life where Amelia could grow up in a safe and loving environment. With each passing day, the darkness of their past seemed to fade, replaced by the warmth of the future that was beginning to take shape. Noah could feel the shift, the subtle yet undeniable sense that things were changing, for the better. And in that moment, for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that the future he had once thought impossible might just be within reach. As the car carrying Noah and Amelia pulled away from the group home, the city lights flickering through the window felt different this time. There was a quiet peace in the air, a tranquility that hadn't been there before. Amelia was nestled soundly in Noah's arms, her soft breathing a reminder of how far they had come together. The weight of the world that had once rested on Noah's shoulders seemed lighter now, replaced by a steady resolve that kept him grounded. Noah stared out the window, the vast stretch of the city before him no longer a place of uncertainty, but a symbol of new beginnings. The past that had haunted him, the hardships, the struggles, the fear, was still present in his memory, but it didn't have the power it once did. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he allowed himself to feel something close to hope. Beside him, Ms. Brooks observed the scene with quiet admiration. She had witnessed so many children come through the system, each one carrying their own pain, their own story. But Noah's was different. His resilience, his unwavering love for Amelia, had left a lasting impression on her. She had seen many children lose their way, but Noah had defied the odds. He had refused to let the hardships of life define him. Instead, he had become a protector, a beacon of strength in the face of adversity. Her vow to support them in every way she could felt stronger than ever. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but she knew that Noah and Amelia's bond was something extraordinary. It was unbreakable. She was determined to see them through, to help them find the stability and love they so deeply deserved. As the car continued on its journey, a new chapter began. Noah wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt that they were heading toward something better. He held Amelia close, her tiny hand resting against his chest, and with it, he felt a sense of purpose. No longer was he alone in the world. The future, uncertain as it was, now felt like a place where he and his sister could belong, together, safe and loved. And for Noah, that was enough to carry him forward, step by step, into whatever came next. News of Noah's extraordinary story spread quickly throughout the community, touching the hearts of those who heard it. Word of a boy who had shouldered the responsibility of caring for his baby sister despite his own struggles resonated deeply with many. It wasn't just a story of hardship, it was a story of pure, unyielding love. People who had once been indifferent to the struggles of others now found themselves moved by Noah's courage. Local organizations, families, and even strangers reached out, eager to offer their help. Offers of support began to pour in: food, clothing, financial assistance, and, perhaps most importantly, offers to help Noah and Amelia find a permanent, loving home. Each new gesture felt like a small but significant act of kindness that chipped away at the walls of despair Noah had once built around himself. Ms. Brooks, too, was deeply moved. She had seen countless children come through the system, many of whom had been forgotten, left to fend for themselves in an often unforgiving world. But Noah and Amelia's story was different. They were not just survivors, they were warriors of the heart. She knew that their bond, so strong and so pure, was something worth protecting, and she vowed to make it her mission to help them find the stability they so desperately needed. The efforts to find a long-term home for Noah and Amelia grew more urgent, and soon, the community rallied around them. People who had never before given a second thought to the struggles of children in foster care were now coming together to make sure that Noah and Amelia would no longer face life alone. There were meetings, phone calls, and plans being set into motion, each one a step toward a better future for the two siblings. For Noah, it was both overwhelming and heartwarming. He had never expected this level of support. He had only ever wanted to protect his sister, to give her a life free from the pain that had defined his own. But now, for the first time, he saw a flicker of light at the end of the tunnel, a future where they could finally feel safe, loved, and whole. In a world where so many children fell through the cracks, Noah's story was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there were still people willing to stand up, to offer help, and to remind the world that compassion and kindness could change lives. As the car carrying Noah and Amelia continued on its journey, the weight of their past seemed to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. Though their path ahead was still uncertain, the kindness they had experienced over the past few days gave them a glimmer of reassurance. Noah held Amelia gently in his arms, her tiny form still and peaceful as she slept, oblivious to the whirlwind of events that had brought them to this point. For the first time in what felt like forever, Noah allowed himself to breathe a little easier. Perhaps, just perhaps, things were beginning to change. Ms. Brooks, seated beside him, couldn't help but glance at the siblings, her heart full of admiration for the bond they shared. She had seen firsthand the depths of Noah's strength, his unwavering commitment to Amelia, and the resilience that had carried him through unimaginable pain. And now, as they moved toward a future where they could finally have a real chance at stability, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to help them. The car drove through the city, the lights outside blurring into a steady stream as they made their way toward the group home. In the back seat, Noah's thoughts drifted. He had always known that protecting Amelia was his purpose, but he had never imagined that the world around them would open up in such a way. Offers of support, the growing sense of community, the promise of a future together, it all felt surreal. But it was real. He could feel it in his bones, in the way people had come together to make sure they weren't alone. As they arrived at the group home, a quiet sense of relief washed over Noah. It wasn't the end of their journey, but it was a safe haven for the time being. The warm light from the building's windows seemed to embrace them, offering a glimpse of what could be, a place where they could rebuild, heal, and finally begin to live the life they deserved. Noah carefully stepped out of the car, still cradling Amelia in his arms, and took a deep breath. This was just the beginning of a new chapter for them. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but for the first time in a long while, he believed they could face it together. He had kept his promise to protect her, to give her the love and security that had been so hard to hold on to. And now, with a little bit of hope, they were ready to build a future full of possibility. Ms. Brooks watched them as they walked toward the entrance of the group home, a quiet smile on her face. She had seen many children come and go, but none quite like Noah and Amelia. Their strength, their love, and their resilience had not only changed their own lives but had inspired everyone who had come into contact with them. The world may have seemed harsh, but there were still moments like this, moments when compassion and care had the power to light the way. As the days passed, Noah and Amelia settled into their new routine at the group home. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. They had a roof over their heads, warm meals, and a sense of security they had never known before. For the first time in years, Noah felt like he could breathe without the constant weight of fear on his shoulders. Amelia, too, was thriving. The quiet hum of the group home, the gentle care of the staff, and the growing community around them began to heal the wounds they had carried for so long. Noah found solace in the small moments, the way Amelia's laughter echoed through the hallways when she played with the other children, the way the staff treated them with kindness and respect, and the sense of belonging that started to grow in his heart. It wasn't the life he had imagined for them, but it was a good one. A safe one. And in that safety, Noah realized something he had been denying for so long: they could have a future. Not a perfect one, but one worth fighting for. Ms. Brooks, who had been a constant source of support, visited them often. She watched them from the sidelines, proud of the progress they had made. The bond between Noah and Amelia had only grown stronger, and she knew that, no matter what the future held, they would never be alone again. In her heart, she knew that the world wasn't as cold as it had once seemed. There were still people who cared. And she had seen firsthand the power of love and resilience. For Noah, every new day was a reminder that he had kept his promise to Amelia, that he had given her the love and protection she deserved. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. They were no longer just surviving, they were beginning to live. Together. And with that, Noah finally allowed himself to imagine a future where they could thrive, not just as survivors, but as a family. In the end, Noah and Amelia's journey was not defined by the hardships they had endured, but by the strength they had found in each other. Through loss and uncertainty, they had forged an unbreakable bond, one that no circumstance could ever sever. Their story was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the kindness of strangers. Though the road ahead was still long and uncertain, they now walked it with hope, knowing that no matter what came their way, they would face it together. And that, in itself, was enough to light the way forward.